Hello and welcome to another Squeakerchimp tutorial. Lots of things have changed since I last was front of the camera. I now have a new camera stand which hopefully won't wobble as much as the last one, and I have also got loads of ideas coming up for things to show you how to make. So if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. That will mean that you can see all of my future videos, but if you hit the bell icon, that means that you will get a notification when one of my new videos is available. So that's really important. So today, without further ado, what we are going to be talking about is we're going to be talking about my little friend here. Look, he's just here. And it's Halloween coming up very soon. It's the 26th of October today, and so we've got Halloween in a few days, and I thought what better than to make something Halloweeny and something that perhaps you have never thought of before. And so we're going to have a go at making this spider with, well, my daughter said you've bejazzled his bottom, which I suppose technically I have bejazzled his bottom, but he does have a rather nice diamond on his bottom, and then we've got paper beads throughout. And this is a template that I have used. I've made this template, and I will make sure that this template is available. It's going to be uploaded and available on my Facebook group, which is Squeakerchimp Paper Bead group. And so if you head on to my paper bead page on Facebook, I will leave the link below. You can then follow the link to get to my paper beading group, where everyone posts lots of lovely ideas and lots of things they made. It's a really great community group for everyone to ask questions or to find out how to do things. But in the meantime, if you would like to be able to download this template, then head on over to that page. So without further ado, because I have managed to waffle, unlike me, I know, you know, I'm not normally a waffler. Unlike me, yeah, 2 minutes 26 I've managed to waffle for today. Yeah, and I also need to make sure I'm looking at the right camera, which is over there, which is just habit to not look at the right camera. But anyway, we live and learn. We're getting there. Okay, so let's get started. For this project, you're going to need a 3mm paper bead roller. You could use a smaller one, but I wouldn't go any bigger. You're also going to need 20 gauge wire, and I've chosen silver. And you'll also need 22 gauge wire, and again I've gone for a silver colour. You're going to need a selection of bugle beads, seed beads, and beads that are slightly larger, a nice selection of beads. And what you'll also need is this paper bead template. Now, you don't have to use this template. I've just made it to make life easier for you. So what you are seeing at the moment is you're going to have 8 legs. So there are 8 strips for each leg. So 1 strip per leg, which will make the teardrop beads. The head is made up of 4 strips, and the body is made up of 5 strips. So you're going to roll all of those together, and they will create the bead. You're going to need a nice pair of sharp scissors to cut your strips out, and you're also going to need some form of jewellery making tool. Now, these are a nice combination of wire cutter and round nose pliers. They're kind of an easy all-round thing because you'll need them to cut your wire and also to make the ends of your spider's feet. Okay, so now we're getting to the part where we're going to cut our strips out, and you'll see that on your template you have a white strip around each of the edges, and this is because every printer is slightly different. If I made the template so that it fitted up to the edge, some people would find that it has chopped some of it off, or your printer just won't print those edges. So I always leave a little strip around the edge just to be sure, but you don't need to cut that off. You can still use it. So what I'm doing here is I am cutting just inside the line, and I am trying to make sure that I don't cut any white off with my strip. It's not the end of the world if you do, but you're trying to create a strip that is just pure colour and not any of the white. And I really enjoy cutting out the paper bead templates. I find it really relaxing. It's something you can just sit and do whilst watching the TV. It's just a kind of mindless activity, if that makes sense. It's not something that you have to think too much about. But you do need a nice sharp pair of scissors. Long ones really help because you can get through them much quicker. So I'll just do one last side to show you, and then we will come back when all of them are cut out. And what you can see here is what I have started to do is I've actually started to pull the paper down. So can you see my scissors aren't cutting? I'm actually using the scissors to cut the paper, but without actually cutting. So there we go. So I will just show you a nice little trick here of what I like to do with mine if I am making anything that's like a bicone or a teardrop bead, is I will cut triangles out the end, because when you roll, otherwise what happens is that you can sometimes see those ends. So I just chop them off. So here we are, we're back with all 5 of our strips chopped up, and you need to make sure that they are all the same length and that they are all at the same point at the bottom. And then we flip them over and we insert them into our paper bead roller. Now you need to make sure that when you're rolling you are keeping all of your strips together, because if they're not, then they won't create a nice tidy bead. So pop it in the end of the bead roller and we are going to start to roll. Now the type of bead that we are making is a teardrop bead, as you can see from the spider. So we're looking to create this type of bead, and I have got tutorials which I will put a link to, which will show you exactly how to make them in a bit more time. But what we're aiming to do is we're aiming to finish with the triangles off centre, so not in the middle, off centre. So the best way to do that is to just focus on one side of your bead and with that end. And what we're going to do is we're going to try and roll our bead so that we are only slightly offsetting the strips on one side. Can you see that top side? Just very slightly down. And you can see that the other end just sorts itself out. It just starts to move up. And if you think that you're slightly off, just give your strips a little bit of a wriggle and just get them back to where you want them to be. That's how we create a nice teardrop bead. It's just focus on one side, just focus on just going on just on the inside of the previous strips that you've done, and just keep rolling, and the other side will sort itself out. Now as I'm rolling this bead, I can see that I have missed some white bits. I didn't chop them off, but am I worried? Not really. No one's really going to look at my spider and go, oh gosh, she left some white bits on. I'm not worried about it, so we'll just carry on. So what we're going to do is we'll now apply some glue, and I quite often apply a little bit more glue than is actually required, because what I like to do is squash my strips down. But can you see I've got loads of excess glue on my thumb? I'm just going to roll it around the rest of the bead, and what I find it does, it just smooths out your bead, because when you cut your paper, invariably you might end up with a few fibres just sticking up, or you might end up with just a few layers just not quite sitting as smooth as they can. That extra glue rather, will help just smooth it all down. So what we're going to do now is you are going to create exactly the same type of bead, but for the legs, and you're only going to use one strip, and then you're going to create a bicone bead for the head. And then we will come back when we have created them all and we have glazed them all, and we will come back and actually make the spider. Okay, so we are now at the point where we can start to construct our spider. So as you can see in my bowl, I have got a nice selection of colour coordinated beads, and I thought these would be a nice colour to use for Halloween, lots of Halloweeny autumnal colours. We've also got our completed beads, which have all now been glazed. And I've also found some extra bits and pieces just from my pot. I've not been and bought anything. I've got a bead cap here that I thought I'd use. And I also found this diamond. It's obviously clearly not real, but I just thought I might as well use it up. It's just something. Okay, so with our 20 gauge wire, this is what we're going to use for the body, and I'm going to cut a piece that is about 8 inches long. Now, I cut a piece that is just too long, but I wanted to make sure that I certainly didn't run out of it. I've made a spider before and found that I was a little bit short. And with the 22 gauge wire, this is what we're going to use for the legs. Now, you're going to need a piece that is again about 30 centimetres folded in half. So you're going to need 4 pieces that are 30 centimetres. Fold them in half so each side is 15, and you will have plenty. And I will leave conversions in the description as to what I mean by 30 centimetres, which I can tell you it's probably about 12 inches. So for our body, what we're going to do is we're going to start with our diamond, and I'm just going to insert it on there and fold my wire over and create a twist in it, because I want to twist it so that it will go into the end of the body. Now, I am not a jewellery maker. I make no claims to being a jewellery maker. It is not an area that I do lots of. I make beads and I make all sorts of things, but jewellery making isn't necessarily something that I can lay claims to. So if you're watching this as a professional jewellery maker, please forgive me. So what I've done is I've put my bead in and I've squashed it on. Okay, and so now we pop it into the end of our body and slide it up and make sure it creates a nice fit. Just make sure you're happy with it. And then we can move on to the legs. Okay, and it's at this point that I got distracted by somebody that clearly thought I was talking to them and wouldn't leave me alone. So I had to give them a little bit of attention. So brief cat interlude coming up. Here she is. She's appeared in a few videos, but here she is in real life. And we're back to making the beads. So what we're going to do is, now we've got our bead, is we can now focus on the legs. So we take all 4 pieces of wire, and these are going to go on here like so. But first of all, what we need to do is we will need to twist them to make a loop so that they will stay in one place once they're on the bead. So I'm using my round nose pliers and I am twisting them. Now this is quite a tricky thing to do. It's quite tricky to get them to lay flat, but once they're on the bead, once they're on the spider, you don't really notice them. And I can see that I'm going off camera, so I do apologise, but you can see that I have twisted them and twisted them again so that they create a nice smooth twist. And then I can pop them onto the body part. And what I've noticed is that they don't sit as flat as they could. So when I put the head bead on, you'll notice that there is a bit of a gap between the two. I'm going to pop my bead cap on and I'll show you what I mean in a minute. So can you see that they don't quite fit as snugly as they could? There's a little bit of a gap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pliers and I'm just going to squash the whole twisty mass. Just squash it down a bit just so that those wires stay a bit flatter. Now you need to be careful that you don't break the wire by doing this, because wire can be quite delicate. So you just need to squash them down just so that they sit a bit flatter and a bit smoother. next to the 2 beads. Now that looks much better. So once we have done all of our bits and we have got our bead cap on, what I've then noticed, and this is something that you might like to, it's a little bit of a tip for you. So we made our beads with 3mm roller, and our wire is considerably smaller. So one thing that you can do, which will make it a lot easier, is to stick some beads down inside the bead. So I've chosen a bead here. So here I've selected a slightly smaller bead, and this one will go in, and these will just help to fill the cavity of where the beads have been made. And this is why right at the very beginning I did say that you could make your beads with a smaller bead roller if you wanted to. But I like the appearance of the 3mm beads. I like the way that they roll. And can you see that we've just popped that one in and it's disappeared, which is fantastic because it's just going to fill that cavity. I reckon we could probably fit one more bead on just to make sure it's a nice snug fit. So I'll just pop the last bead on, and then we can go ahead and we can put our bead cap on. And this will create a nice snug fit. So that is our body done. So what we're going to do is we can now cut the excess off, and we're probably going to need about 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, or about 1 centimetre, and we will just roll the end. And we are looking to create a tight fit. So you can see I pushed everything down to make sure that when I rolled this wire, everything was really squashed together. We don't want everything to be jiggling and moving around. So now what we're going to do is we're going to separate our leg wires, and you need to work out what wire is going to go where. So I can see there that those wires have got crossed, so I'm just going to separate my wires out to make sure that they are all heading in the right direction. And I've got way more wire than I actually need, but that just gives me that room to play. And if I decide I want to make really long legs, I can do. So what I'm going to do is I am going to start by threading on some bugle beads. Now, quite often what happens is when you cut your wire, you can get slightly sort of frayed ends. And what I find is it's quite handy to just use the flat part of my pliers just to flatten that end out a little bit. So I'm going to choose a bugle bead because I've obviously changed my mind there. I am definitely going to go for a bugle bead. I know I have. I'm going to pop my bugle bead on because right at the bottom of your bead, of your spider rather, there's not a lot of room where your legs all join. So you don't want big clumpy beads to be in that area. And then I am going to add some more beads, and there is a pattern that I am going to follow, but I'm going to do it in a kind of random way. So I will show you it in a little bit as to what that pattern is, but I'm just choosing beads, not particularly any colour at the moment. But what I need to make sure is, again, because our legs, the 8 beads that we have made for the legs have that 3mm hole, I need to make sure that I am not ending the point where I'm going to put that bead on with a small bead. Now, some of these bugle beads I find are quite tricky to get onto the wire, and that's because they seem to be filled with some white powder. They do seem to, they are glass, and some of them can be quite narrow, so they do take a little bit of persuasion to get on, shall we say. So we're just going to carry on popping some beads on until we get to the point where I think, yep, that's enough for the top part of the leg. So we're squashing it all down, and you can see that's how far we've got. So I've gone for a bugle bead, some seed beads, bugle bead, and then some more seed beads. And I'm going to pop my teardrop on, and you can see that I have. And this is what I mean about the whole of the bead. You need to make sure that you are putting a large bead on either side of them. If you put a bugle bead on, it's literally just going to disappear up the whole of the bead. So we're going to do the next part of the bead, which I will start with a big bead, a bugle bead, if I can get it to go on. Yep, that's going on. And then I'm going to go for about 3 of the smaller beads, of the round beads, seed beady type things. And then we will end with a bugle bead. See what I mean? It needs a little bit of persuasion just to get it to go down. So there we go. So that's what I'm going to end with. So you can see I've definitely got plenty of wire. So I'm just going to give it a 90-degree turn to the wire, like so. And I'm going to chop the excess off. And then I'm going to roll it over and move everything out the way. And I'm going to roll it over because I want to create a round end to my spider. Now, I'm not worried too much about what these ends look like as such. No one's going to look at my spider and go, oh gosh, that's not a perfect circle. That's been wound around more than once. I just want my legs to look nice. And I just want people to have a go at making these things and not be too worried about them having to be absolutely perfect, or because you aren't fantastic at jewellery making. Just have a go, it doesn't matter. Okay, so once all of our legs have been put together, what we are going to do is just rearrange the legs. So we want 4 at the back and 4 facing the front on each side. And spiders have that lovely knack of being able to support their bodies on their little spindly legs. So that's the look that we're going for. So we want to move the wire upwards from the body and then bend the legs downwards so that we create that lift from the body. So once you've done that, you can just play around with the legs, have a little rearrange until you're happy with the way that they look. And then I will show you from the front what these legs and the spider looks like. So bear with me whilst I move my camera off of its stand, and I will bring it down so that you can see the spider from the front. So you can see how its body is supported up off the ground. And there we go. There you have it. One completed spider, all ready for Halloween. Now, you could easily turn this into a brooch, into a necklace. But there we go. One spider. Thanks for watching.